Hello there, lovely listeners and viewers. You have found your way back down the red rabbit hole. You've burrowed down and you found our second episode with the lovely Sally Ann Martyn. Sally Ann, you survived
Hello.
the week.
I did. I did. Nice peace and quiet, away from barking dogs and general life.
What they all
And
say,
Oh,
isn't it? The
that
authors.
sounds
yeah,
really dark and miserable, doesn't it? Away from life.
away from life. No more
As
life
I
for you.
say, they all say it, Sally Ann. All the authors say, I had a really nice quiet week
Yeah.
for
I think
writing.
naturally authors are quite introverted anyway, so we like our kind of solitude to be able to just get on with things.
Yeah, and I think also if you write dark stuff, I don't know, like people can write in cafe. I cannot. I have to write. I write in the dark. Either the lights will be dimmed in here, or I write in my bedroom in darkness. It's just I spend most. It's a miracle I can see when I go out into sunlight.
Mm. You're
The
you're used.
question, oh, sorry.
I was going to say you're used to working in the dark then.
Yeah.
That's all we have down here,
I was
apart
going to come
from
in
the.
with a question for
Oh,
both of you, actually,
okay.
even though we barely introed, but they know who we are, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
we're
that's
we're
okay.
fine.
How do you? So, if you write really dark stuff, I know Nikki, you like to write from like a serial killer's perspective. You like to write from your killer's perspective. Sally Ann, I know you like to write dark stuff. You like to write in the dark. How do you like transition back into the real world? Like, if you need to go and get some shopping, something.
I squint a lot, go into the light, very dark sunglasses, head down.
You're assuming that we transition back.
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
can't we just
exactly. Yeah.
remain in our dark mood?
Yeah, I think it's quite hard actually because when you are really writing, when it's at the best bit, when you're into the story, you kind of, I feel sorry for people around you because you do kind of just zone out. And not that you're always in the dark, but you just mentally are kind of thinking about stuff all the time. And I would imagine for the people that's quite difficult because you start to, it's not pretend, not say it's like method acting or anything, but you do kind of, your head's always in that story, well, most of the
Mm.
time in the story. So it is actually quite difficult to transition. But I think you do need to go out and get daylight because you occasionally
Got
is
that
good.
Some
vitamin
vitamin
D need,
D,
yeah.
yeah. Well, actually, when you're reading something, and you're really, really into it, like you might, if you have to go out, you're forced to kind of go out in public with other people, but you're really into a book at that time. You kind of want to start talking about it, but if they're not reading it with you, you can't. So it's not like there is that you're going to have to explain all of it, and you're never going to capture it as well as the author has captured it and shared it with you in the story. And you kind of, I have that slight thing where I'm partially in the story that I'm reading, so I can imagine for an author, you're creating that world, so you must be really into that world. Do people in your life kind of know, oh, she's deep, she's deep in her writing mode at the moment?
Yeah.
Well, I write first person, so it can be even worse for me because I'm kind of in character mode. Like Sally Ann said, it's kind of like being a method actor, I guess, from that point of view.
That's a
Actually,
worry knowing what you write.
yeah, I actually had my mum say something to me along the lines of, "I don't want to talk to Shiri. I want to talk to my daughter." And she knew that I was like, I said something, but I'd said something like as the character, not as real me.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. But also, like, if you're writing someone who, I suppose from an acting, like if you're acting someone who's a bit grumpy, a bit snappy, a bit like not very nice and doesn't really like other people, then do you become them? Do you get a bit snappy?
Kind of, I think so. I think it's very hard to because it's like one long empathize, I guess, session when you're writing first person to be in that character's head. So it can be quite hard. What do you think, Sally? Do you tend to kind of snap at people if you're writing from a kind of grumpy person's point of view?
No, I can see for you if you're writing first person. and from a if you're doing it from a serial killer's point of view, how that would be very intense. I could see how that would happen because you're constantly having to think how I can imagine you come away from the computer and you are thinking, well, what would they do? How would that? I can see
Mm.
that for me because it's mostly third person. I've got to step back. But what I did with the clinic, the first book, which is set in the asylum, I wrote in the dark. I played Agnes Obel all day long, which is quite dark,
Wow.
kind of moody music. In fact, I've got them here, like photographs on what I've got, like mood boards of just awful stuff. Like that's the dog that's in it. And so I'd got all pictures of derelict asylums and anything. So I'd just spend my entire day. So it'd take me a minute to get out of that, but I wouldn't act in a way that the characters would, but I'd be aware. So in the clinic, there's Amy who has weight issues and issues mentally to do with that. So and there's a bit where she gets on a train and people won't move their bags for her. It's very difficult for her. She's very self-conscious. So if I go on a train, I will think this would be hard for her. I can think of it
Mm.
in a third person thing. This would be hard for her. This is what she would think, rather than it's not in me.
So when you were writing the Beauty Queens, you didn't have like a sash that you'd put on to go out down the shops in and a
Constantly,
tiara.
constantly. Rather embarrassing, yeah. And one of those got those sticks
Oh
to push
yeah, the
around. Yeah,
scepter.
yeah. No.
So tell us about the clinic then.
So in 19, I'm sure the date 1994, I moved down south from where was I then? I was in Derbyshire then, and I'd worked in care homes as a care assistant. The only job I could get, funnily enough, Hill End Hospital, all of the asylums, the old, they weren't known as asylums then, but that's what they were built for, were closing. There was a government thing to get people out of them and to have, I guess it was cost effectiveness, just the environments were really tough. So they were having like a mass employment, what they call it, a recruitment drive. So I
Mm.
kind of wandered in, got the job in about 2 minutes. Oh, aren't I lucky? No. So got my job, moved everything down to St. Albans. I was living in a HMO, which is like a house where you have your room and you have a joint kitchen. So that's tough in itself. They're quite tough environments. Um, so I ended up working at Hill End, which was a really tough place. So it's literally crumbling around you. At one point, it had housed 1,500 patients. I mean, it had its own railway station, it had its own farm, its own. At one point, it was, it was a town like in itself. But by this point, there were 7 wards, only 7 wards open. Staff were in disarray. There'd been what do you call like tribunals, and there was inquiries going on because somebody had been left who was supposed to be observed all the time. Been left and taken their own life. So I walked in and the staff were all under scrutiny. And I'm like, hello, hello. Just like bright and bubbly. And then after 3 months, I honestly didn't know whether I should be there as a patient or staff. And at times I thought there must be a reason I'm here. There must be one day this will make sense. And so when I was thinking about a setting, I thought, okay, I know where I'm going to go back into that environment. So that's how the clinic came about. And the subject matter was about diets because I thought, well, who would be in that place now? Because I remember thinking at the time, I knew they were going to make it into luxury apartments, which is quite common with buildings like that. And I was like, I would never live here. Never. I don't care how luxurious they make it. Like, I believe that walls soak in all the torment
Mm.
um, that's within them. I really do believe that. Um, So yeah, so they did make it into luxury apartments, but that wasn't really what I wanted to write. So I thought, okay, I've had years of madness with diets. So women would come here and they'd lock themselves away and we'll have a different kind of, madness in that respect. And I should say when I worked there, it wasn't a lot of it, the patients were like my friends who I'd sit with. It was a lot of the staff, a lot of male staff that were very difficult.
Mm. We had in Northamptonshire there was St Crispin's that actually burnt down. ironically enough. And that was quite horrific because there was wards that were locked, so people couldn't get out.
Yeah.
It was just like a tinderbox, and it just all went up. And there's been lots of like ghost hunters that were around there, and that actually got changed into apartments as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was like 95, you'd think it was, I mean, it's 30 years ago, you'd think that'd be quite modern, but there was a female ward, and you're talking, I was on the acute ward, so people, while they were waiting to get put in other places, quite challenged, people with really challenging illnesses, and you'd have females, some wandering about. Then in the no locked doors, no protection. Then the day room, which was basically everyone smoked there, everyone, staff, patients, it was
Mhm.
like a smoke-filled fog of a massive room. And then the male patients through an open door the other way, so people could what it was really, really not good in any respect.
I think they had to close the asylums in the end because no matter how many times they kind of attempted a rebrand
Hmm.
of those spaces were built with a particular purpose in mind, which was to take certain people out of the community and put them somewhere else for their own safety, but more, I think, for the safety of other people. So no matter, mental health facilities or whatever they kind of got renamed to over time, I think in people's minds who live in the area as well, that's always going to be that. That's always
Yeah,
going
and
to be
they
that, no
certainly, I
matter.
think Hill End had about four different names over the years to try and, like you say, try and bring it into time. But internally, it was just the same place.
And I
And
suppose you've got, oh, sorry.
I was going to say they had such a bad reputation, everything from like electrotherapy all the way through to lobotomies they were doing, and no one really knew what they were doing back then.
Well,
Um,
I witnessed electric shock therapy, and again, no training, no prepare yourself. Just it's like, could you go down with Carol or whatever made up name of a patient, just escort her down there and be like, okay, okay. And I'm sure because this is in the clinic as well, I use this. You go down to a basement and I remember like brick walls and it just been damp and then they give them sedatives, gave her sedatives. So then she's acting obviously in a strange way. I've never seen anyone have a sedative like that. And then they hook them up to the electric stuff and they're shocked. And I'm just like, nobody explained it to me because they just were understaffed and it was just the bare minimum of people around. So I was seeing really, to me, and they're putting things in their mouth so they don't bite their tongue. It's like the stuff, I mean, it's still done now in some places, but it's like the stuff of horror films, but you're seeing it happen to somebody and then sitting with them while they come round after it. It was just anything you'd think about that would freak you out, you would see in the 90s
and
still.
and the whole point of that therapy, in inverted commas, if people are listening on the podcast, I've done bunny ears around it. Therapy was to trigger and like an epileptic fit,
Hmm.
wasn't it? And if they weren't held down properly, then they could break limbs or really hurt themselves.
Yeah, so you're secured, they would be secured down and have sedatives, and you had seven. It was then you'd have seven treatments, and if it hadn't worked after that, then it wasn't going to work for you.
Hmm.
But it was, it's brutal. It was to see, for some people it worked, for some people it hasn't worked. I know there have been a lot of people that have suffered because of that since. And I would say, I remember one time, alarms would go off and you'd have, a patient would just react badly or have psychosis. And again, I'm just kind of dawdling around, like very naive young girl. An alarm would just ring and be like, what? Seven men would just run in like in white coats from nowhere and just rugby tackle the patient to the ground, inject them, and then they're out. It was just a very, very strange. It was just ripe for, one day this strange environment.
Yeah,
And
you got
we
to think about who was drawn to work there. And I'm also thinking of that period of the 90s, you could well have people who have been there since the 70s.
Yes,
You know, some
there
of,
were women there that had been there for having sex before marriage. And
wow.
they're institutionalized by the time you've been there. And then a guy who he had learning disabilities. He didn't need to be in a psychiatric, he had learned, but he was in his, when it was closing, he was in his 70s. There was no way,
Mm.
if he's been in there since a child, because there were children there as well, there's no way he's going out and being able to support himself, or they're just institutionalized at that point.
Mm.
Yes. So yeah, there were still people there that were in for the most nefarious of reasons.
I did some similar research for my book, The 13th Girl, because my protagonist had just come out of a mental health care facility, although the one that she was in was actually quite nice. They didn't do anything like that. Um, but she was still institutionalized. And so when she came out, she didn't quite understand things and like decisions, even small decisions of like what to wear, what time to go to bed, what to eat, all mounted up on her. And she couldn't function properly because she was never taught how to function properly because she'd been in there since she was a teenager.
And for some, it was, I mean, I saw lots of documentaries on it as well. For some, they didn't want to leave. I've
Mm,
seen this on YouTube. You can watch if you look up Hill End as a patient, ex-patient goes back there, and you would think she was talking about some lovely house development she'd grown up in, and that's where we used to do that. And that, for some, it was quite traumatic to leave. It was secure and it was all what they
it was
knew.
home, yeah.
Well, also knowing what we now know about trauma and and the neurobiology of what happens when you are traumatized and you experience that. So there's, it's like the kind of Stockholm syndrome thing, but those feelings, those responses, which would be considered a survival response in any other context, safe becomes something you're then seeking. I can imagine there's people who would leave who would never be able to sort of sleep in silence, would need noise, because actually that's what makes them feel safe and comfortable now, because they've become so accustomed to it. So, knowing what we know now, and yeah, hearing stories of, women who perhaps had, did things in the past that would now nobody would raise bat an eyelid about, but they've ended up in an institution, and actually, that has made them who they are now. That's made them into what's going on for them now.
Well, in Victorian times, it was if a man wanted to remarry and he couldn't divorce his wife, he
Mm.
would put her in an asylum. That was the quickest way to just get out of the marriage and have it annulled.
She's getting a little bit testy, this woman.
Yeah.
There's something.
Off with you, lady, to the asylum on the hill.
Yeah, just hide away. There were hideaway places. They were just to
Mm,
hide away your problems, hide away embarrassing family members, hide away issues. And obviously, a man in those days had a lot more, far, far more power than a woman would have done. And
yeah.
women, everything was about hysteria for women. If a
Mm.
woman dared to speak up or shout or get angry, it was hysteria, and we're better to hide her away.
The Laughing Factory.
Mm.
Yeah.
Isn't it is it quite famously one of the presidents, one of the American families? Wasn't there a woman in one of the families who was she was a bit feisty, and she was maybe a little bit problematic, and she ended up in some sort of institution?
Yeah, I
Was
think so.
that, who
I
was
don't
her
know, but I wouldn't like to say
name?
the next, not the Kennedys, is it? It's one of the
Was it? I think it was. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is one of the Kennedys. I'm gonna
Careful, you
look it
throw
up
in any more
now.
key words, now you've got presidential and things like that. We'll end up with way more listeners than we started.
Yeah. Woohoo! Maybe a few FBI
Yeah.
officers.
Homeland Security, all sorts.
Was it
Double our
Margaret?
listeners.
Was it Margaret? Quite famous. I'm not typing very well, so I'm trying to. Rosemary Kennedy. That's who it was. Sorry, we were
Who
always
was
so well organized. She
who
just
was
occurred to
she
me that
then to the Kennedy boys? Was she the mum or the sister
she
or
was the
auntie?
eldest daughter of Joseph and Rose Kennedy, and she was institutionalized at Saint Coletta's School for Exceptional Children in Jefferson,
Well,
Wisconsin,
that's a
after
nicer way
undergoing a
of doing it.
lobotomy
For
in
exceptional people.
1941. So she was 23, but where she experienced developmental delays as a child and was described as having mood swings and becoming increasingly difficult in her young adult years, which just sounds very normal to me. I think there's
She was
lots
a
and lots of people
teenage
who can have a little
girl.
bit of developmental difficulty, but develop a little bit slower, but be
Yeah.
absolutely fine. Um, but there's pictures. I'm sure I've seen pictures of her before, and she's grinning, and I think she was quite passionate, fun, maybe a bit wild, and then was not in
So
her
when was this,
later
in the
life.
60s, was it then?
Yeah, this
60s?
must have been in 1941.
Oh,
So she
41.
had the
Oh,
lobotomy in 1941.
oh, geez.
Wow.
And in later life, she had limited she had limited contact with her family initially, and then she did visit them in later life, and she died in 2005 at the age of 86.
Blimey.
She had a long life, yeah. The family initially kept her institutionalization a secret and she was largely isolated from her siblings and extended family for a period of time. There were some royals as well, weren't there? There were some British royals. They did look at it in the Crown. They did bring up the sisters, didn't they, in the Crown? And I think that was they maybe had learning difficulties of some kind, and they didn't really
I think if it was
couldn't have them
just
associated with the
a
royal
woman with
family.
an opinion, basically, I think was
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, yeah. There you go.
How did the lobotomies get going? Because who thought, I'm going to drill a hole in this person's head and then just poke a stick around for a little bit and hope
Is
that
it
it does something?
is it that Phineas Gage again?
Oh
It always
no.
comes back to Phineas Gage, doesn't it? Poor Phineas Gage.
Is
So
that the
he's the
guy with the
guy.
the railway spike in his
Yeah,
head?
yeah. Phineas Gage is the guy with the railway spike, and the injury was through his eye in his brain and changed his personality afterwards.
Yeah,
So
but
I
I
don't think it went the way of making him happy. I think it made him very miserable. But if I'd got a railway spike through my eye, I'd probably feel the same.
That'd be pretty sad.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be happy for the rest of my life. But
well,
I
yeah,
think it was that he
you'd
was
never be able to wear
completely
glasses or
changed.
shades again, would you? That would limit your eyewear.
But maybe, there's got to be some thinking of science around that if because and you can isolate parts of the brain.
But it
They do
it didn't
that. They do
sound,
that in
back then they
surgery, don't
weren't really
they?
doing that though. Back then they didn't have the technology to do that. They would literally just shove in a stick and then twizzle it
But
round a
that's
little bit.
it. They're making some connections to what modern neuroscience tells us. Because if you're having there is brain surgery where you will watch the procedure, or they'll ask people who are musicians to play an instrument so that they know when they touch the part of the brain that is maybe affected or they don't want to
Mm.
affect. They'll ask somebody to talk or recite the alphabet, read a book or whatever during their surgery so that they can tell if oh, no, not there. Back here. This is bit. Don't touch that bit. That's the center for this.
I would not want to be the guinea pig.
Yeah.
No,
Do you imagine how did they find? Yeah. But that I suppose that brings us back to the asylum because those people probably they
they
were
were the guinea pigs,
guinea
whether they
pigs.
wanted to be or not.
They
Yeah,
had no choice. Yeah.
yeah. But I
Fun
still don't
times.
quite understand it because even if you change someone's personality, that, like you said, that doesn't mean to say they're going to be happy afterwards. And I I
It
just
was
I don't
I think it's
understand that.
total guesswork, a lobotomy.
Was it
I
more
think
to
you're
make
just
them
lucky. You're
easier to
lucky if you hit
handle?
a certain. Well, if they're focusing, aren't they, on the frontal lobe, which is the
Hmm.
frontal lobe is kind of the bit that helps you to socially, navigate the world around you, socially interact with other people, understand what's right and what's wrong. So if they hit that, then I suppose it just takes away a level of I don't know, difficulty in with
Is
other
it
people, I suppose.
dropping
That
into
level of
ignorance is bliss? You know, that kind of ignorance is bliss thing where
yeah,
you
I
perhaps stop being too
wonder.
aware, or maybe you're just too bothered with the fact that you've got a hole in your brain that then becomes your main focus of
Or
everything
is it
rather
that
than.
higher, no, I suppose that level of thinking, of worry, of awareness of yourself in the world and how you interact with other people and, knowing what goes on in the world, news, all the things that can kind of depress us and make us feel rubbish,
But
knowing
that's why there's an off switch on
you
the
don't know
TV
it.
though, or you just turn it
Well, they
over.
were trying, maybe they thought they were going to find the off switch in the brain for
Turn
that.
it over
I,
to The Simpsons,
Yes.
and
Unfortunately.
you'll be
I
much
think, I
happier.
mean, certainly historically, and I would say even when I was there, a lot of it is just like sedating. They just want people to be quiet. They just want the calms, whether it's sedatives, whether it's medication, whatever it is. It's just, even like the smoking, everyone's smoking, and that's just keep everyone occupied, keep them happy. I do think there was, and there certainly was. There's been some quite serious accusations against the place I worked at since, and from the children's department, horrific things. And I just think there was just a lot of unregulated bad stuff in those places. And I think it was a good thing that they were closed. And I just hope that those people, I don't even know where they would go. They'd have to go to some kind of equivalent, like we were saying about the institutionalized patients. They couldn't go to any self-care with social work. They wouldn't be able to. They'd have to go somewhere that was a living unit. But I
Mm,
just hope for their sake it was a just much more clean and modern with much more regulation and staff that were very committed to making their lives better.
mm.
I worked in a residential home for adults with learning disabilities. And I think we had, I mean, it was later, it was a much later period, but I do remember there was somebody who then came to move in to work with us who not work with us, but was moving into the residential home. And they were coming from some sort of institution. But what always struck me about their story is that there was something about the date of the move. It was never quite settled down. So, well, they'd like pack the bags and put them in the corner of their room. And I think for this person, they maybe didn't have speech,
Mm.
or there was a question over whether they understood or didn't understand what was going to happen, like, but I think they did have really good understanding, they just couldn't communicate. But to just sit with the bags in the corner of your room, like, I think for a couple of weeks, so to
Mm.
not really know when you're, and like you say, you're institutionalized, this is your life, this is your home, you've been there a really long time, and you're going to be moved and nobody's really telling you when that's going to be. And kind of, I think even very well-meaning people who I worked with can overlook the need to communicate effectively with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that might be, but yeah, to residential homes, residential settings, maybe some supported living arrangements as well, those sort of places. I mean, what was most tragic in what you said there, Sally Ann, about the accusations was that there was a children's department, full stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in part of the clinic was somebody who was, I mean, they were dumping kids, they were dumping badly behaved kids, and this was still happening in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Basically, that out of control teams would just be put there and allegedly, according to, you can Google it on the internet, but allegedly
Mm.
just sedated, and bad things happening. And that was, I was there at that time. I wasn't there for that long, but that's horrific to me to think that I was in the same environment where this other unit was somewhere else, which is basically just a dumping ground for kids that had nowhere else, or they just were too much trouble to deal with.
Well, these things come around again, don't they? Was it 2015? I think there was a report about the children that got off-rolled from schools. So schools just basically, there were kids that were struggling, behavior too difficult to manage in school. And for the schools, a lot of that was about kind of off-rolling them because they were going to impact their figures. So they were
Mm,
going to, they wouldn't, and they'd end up kind of in alternatives. Some would go to like alternative provisions and stuff like that. But also a lot would just, they were kind of missing from the system. They definitely just fell through the gaps, but it was a matter of they were too difficult to handle. And I think they're still doing that to young people now. Luckily, that provision, the alternative provision, is, usually excellent. But, they're G4S, didn't they? Running a lot of children's homes. So I
mm.
don't think we can say that for everything, but I think, yeah, there is some excellent practice now, but I also think there's always things to learn.
Actually, I mean, you even get that in good schools, where they don't want
Mm.
their marks to become down. So I know that I've known schools where they'll ask you, they'll say, I don't think you're really cut out for this. Obviously, they're not going to be put anywhere, but they don't want them in the school because they don't want the grades as a whole to go down.
Yeah, becomes a system where that's what you get measured against. You get measured against your results, I think even the good schools sometimes
But
are,
also when that's held up
teaching to
as the
test.
the main thing, for
Yeah.
these institutions, that this is what you have to be bothered about, not the welfare of your wards, so to speak. It's making sure that you have good test results. I mean, that's just, I mean, they do that with the police as well. It's making sure they have good, solve rates. So some
The
cases are not taken
university.
on. Yeah, and yeah,
Mm.
sad, very sad.
Yeah, the university, that was all about kind of grade outcomes for your course and what everyone got, and it kind of didn't, take into consideration all those people who this was the first generation who'd ever come to university, who'd ever had that opportunity, people returning to education who didn't get on well in education, but coming back into higher education, and the amount of work and support, and it was very rewarding as somebody who would do that, but then to, that you'd be pleased to, you'd be so happy that they got a C, and you'd feel so proud of them that they got a C or something, and they'd be like, no, well, your AB rate is not very good, is it?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter for this person. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Where's their story? Yeah.
I've got something red trying to make its way through the rabbit hole graphic. Have you seen that?
I've had this little pink thing here coming in
It's
and
like our
out.
rabbit hole is
There's
bleeding.
something spooky going
Walls are bleeding.
on. Dark. And for those of us who don't have visuals
Yes,
listening
they're
to
not going to see
this,
that at all, and they're not going to
we
know.
apologise, but there's been
Then
some
get
spooky
yourself on
goings on. Maybe
YouTube.
they might have got some weird sounds, you never know.
Maybe, but they need to get themselves on YouTube, and then they'll see everything. They'll
And
have
like
that
and
extra.
subscribe.
And like and subscribe, yes.
Like and
Don't forget
subscribe.
to do that. So I think we've perhaps depressed everyone enough. Or have
Mm.
we? Because I've got one true crime fact to
Oh,
throw in about lobotomies. And it's my kind of, again, the hill that I'm prepared to die on is the Jeffrey Dahmer case. That I argue every time, Sally Ann, that he was not actually a serial killer. Because the definition of a serial killer is someone who kills for pleasure. And he didn't actually kill for pleasure. It was just because he wasn't doing what he wanted to do very well. He wanted to lobotomize the men with him so they'd stay with him, but he just kept messing it up and
Right.
killing them because that's he never meant to actually kill anyone. He just wanted them to be like, you know, zombies that would stay with him and never leave him because he had a huge abandonment issues.
you effectively want to kick Jeffrey Dahmer out of serial killer school for incompetence.
I do, although I think
Mm.
he's already been murdered for he
Well,
was
yeah.
killed in prison anyway. So yeah, I don't think he
Hmm.
cares where he is right now. But I
But
kind
just,
of do.
in
Every
the...
time he gets put in a serial killer list, I kind of go inside because I'm like, technically, he's not actually a serial killer. I mean, he killed people. That was horrible, but that wasn't his main intent, and his main intent was arguably worse.
Mhm.
He was, I think it was, yeah, I was an au pair in America in 92, I think it was, in Ohio. And just as my mum and dad were seeing me off, I think it was on the coach on the National Express down to London to get to Heathrow. I think it was a front page of the Sun. It must have been his court case, but it was all about the University of Ohio. I was like, take care. So his front page of the newspaper, this new serial killer was in the state I was just heading off to that nobody knew anything about. So, bye.
Well, Jeffrey Dahmer wouldn't have, he wouldn't have attacked you anyway, would he? I don't
Uh,
think you weren't his
Absolutely
victim
not. I was
type.
safe.
Ted
But
Bundy, however, if he'd have
And
gone
like
to
I say, I'm
California,
very helpful and trusting, so I would have helped him
you would
put
have helped him put that stuff in his
furniture up.
Beetle, yeah.
I think, Sally Ann, I think somewhere in the fates, they knew that one day you'd be a crime writer. And they
Yeah,
just sent you
possibly.
off on all these jobs.
Yeah, I
Also a
think so.
housemaid somewhere. All these, went did a bit of hitchhiking, did all the
That's the
things that are
point.
going to lead you into.
Well,
Have you ever?
I listened to I read a Stephen King thing. I was in the Observer this week, and people were asking him questions, and he advises do like what he called blue collar, like jobs. What would we call the equivalent work, like manual labor or things like that?
Mm.
Do those kind of jobs because then you'll mix with all kinds of people. And it was just pure accident that I did a BTEC in performing arts, which set me up for absolutely nothing skilled. I was, a care assistant, which I loved, an auxiliary nurse, shop work. So I'd done all that, and it's taken a long time, but it has, some of them I loved doing at the time, but I have been able to draw on that, and I think he's spot on there because I met so many characters, good and bad.
Yeah, and I think that
Yeah.
that's a big thing about being an author. They always say write what you know, but I think that that advice can be misconstrued a lot of the time because then everyone's like, well, I've never been in a beauty pageant, so I can't write about it. Well, you can research it. That's why the research rabbit holes are so deep and dark, and you can get lost down several times. But you can research things, but you can take what you know and apply it to something that you're writing
Yeah, definitely.
and
Which
be
I've done in
inspired.
all my
Yeah.
books so far. I've done that.
So, Sally Ann, you're going to give us some links, aren't you? And an author photo. You're going to send us them so we can include them in the show notes
Yep.
for any readers that want to get hold of your books.
Yep. So my website is Sally Ann Martyn, Sally Ann with an E, Martin with a Y, not to confuse it, .com. And I think on all social media, I'm just at Sally Ann Martyn. I hope.
Excellent.
I think so.
Well, once again, thank you, listeners and viewers, for sticking with us down the red rabbit hole and burrowing alongside us as we go. We covered quite a bit of ground, I think, in this one, didn't we?
I think we have.
Yep. Which is always a
Always
good
ending
thing.
on that high horse, I think.
Yeah.
We just whoop,
And
every week.
you'll notice I didn't mention Jack the Ripper. And that's
Oh
usually
yeah,
something that
yeah.
pops up, especially with Broadmoor and the Asylums and the person I think Jack the Ripper was. But
Oh
normally I try and
yes.
shoehorn him in, Sally Ann, somewhere. My specialist subject.
No room for shipment today, though, for
No room
me.
for no. That's Lisa's.
Although I
Killer
did
du
the other
jour.
day see a clip of somebody who is a crime person, knowledgeable person, maybe professor or something, whatever, and he was talking about the victim profiles in the UK for serial killers, and he said that it's normally women in these particular age brackets, and I was like, I'm sure that Shipman has absolutely screwed those numbers
Mm.
because because of the numbers. Like I don't, is it really, if you were to put his into context with maybe some of the others, if you were to reduce the numbers or maybe only go by what he was convicted for, but I still think
But
it's just,
So I
they
saw that because it was female victims over 60, wasn't it? And I thought,
yeah,
is it? Is it there? Is that? I
yeah.
thought that seemed like wouldn't be right, but maybe that's why. Maybe it is just he skewed the numbers.
I don't think any of the statistics are quite right anyway, because you've got a lot of missing people that perhaps have been killed that are
Mm.
not included in those statistics at all. That they haven't been solved, so they just don't
Yeah.
know. I read somewhere the other day that there are 2 active serial killers currently in the UK.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's supposed to be one at any one time. There's at least one.
But
Uh,
there's like 2 proper ones going at the moment. That
oh,
yeah, because I remember when the Suffolk Strangler was on the loose, and I was walking home from work, and I decided there was a guy behind me, so I decided I'd like sneak round the bushes to get ahead of him. But instead of, he obviously walked faster than me, so when I walked towards the bushes, I actually popped out right in front of him and scared the crap out of him. So he was like,
That's one of those stories you thought was going to go one way, and
yeah,
turns out Nikki was then in the news the next day,
yeah.
considered is she the Suffolk
I
Strangler?
was I was his stalker. But yeah, it was very uncomfortable with a strange man sort of walking behind you. So I was just like, oh, I'm going to try and get in front of him. So I knew a shortcut through the bushes, but it just pulled me out right in front of him. But anyway, thank you for stalking us, listeners and viewers. And do remember to follow the Red Rabbit wherever you get your social media. And remember to like and subscribe wherever you are. So if you're watching us on
YouTube.
YouTube, yep, or
It
anywhere,
costs nothing to you, but it means a lot to us. We're
it
only a little baby
does.
pod.
We are still a fetus pod, so we need as much nourishment and
Little
validation
pod.
as humanly possible.
Be our placenta and
Yeah,
press like.
yeah, our social placenta. That took a
Ew.
turn, didn't it?
And on that note.
And on that note, yes. We will see you next time. Thank you, Sally Ann, for being with us and
Thank
Thank
you,
not
you.
Sally.
escaping.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.